back to Active Ingredients, the leadership series for people who build, scale, and shape the future of life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International, the life sciences talent consultancy. Today's guest is Gaurav Jain, a globally minded commercial leader with corporate deal makership in his makeup, who's navigated every side of the pharmaceutical business, from strategy to operations, M&A to market entry, and he's delivered growth across branded generics, orphan drugs, and NCEs in every corner of the world. But this episode isn't about spreadsheets and strategy decks. It's about complexity, courage, and conviction. We'll explore what happens when global trade barriers rise, how to win with partnership models that share risk, and why the best leaders keep it simple, especially when the stakes are high. Gaurav, welcome to Active Ingredients.
Thank you, Tom.
Great to have you.
Yeah, it's nice to get started early in the morning. I've enjoyed our conversations so far, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts, my experience over the last 22 years. How I can contribute back to the industry and help it continue to drive innovation and support requirements of our patients who obviously are in need of the new world or the new innovations coming up in the life sciences environment.
Yeah, love it. And we've had some fantastic conversations, and I know you've spoken to people in my business as well, all full of value. And that's why we wanted to bring you on today, because you've got a really good viewpoint on the industry. But we always start our active ingredients episodes in the same way. Okay. So my initial question to you is, what do you think are the three key ingredients of a successful leader, and why?
Okay, so Tom, I think the perfect recipe works separately for different people, but for me, the three core values that have helped me perform well in my industry, in my roles, has been quite clearly objective setting, adaptability, and vision building. I think it is very important for leaders to set clearly laid out P&L driven targets and strategic milestones in every business plan. That's point number one. And these plans need to be adaptive to the evolving business environment and should be stress tested on all key variables that drive such business plans. I've seen a lot of plans which are high on noise, but really not adaptable enough to the changing environments, changing variables when it comes to different factors that play into operating a business. In the end, I think it is very important to have a very clear long-term strategic plan that directs the organization in a clear direction. This can be a blueprint for the next phase of growth and provides or should provide a clear context to the organization on how to think about growth at a grassroots level for each employee, what is expected of them and how do they contribute to this overall vision.
Yeah, love it. So objective settings, adaptiveness, and then clear long-term strategic planning. So being able to bring that mission, that vision to life.
That's correct.
Love it. We're going to have a look at how they kind of weave through your story and your career in a few questions time. But what I wanted to understand first, though, was your career in life sciences. Was it predetermined? Was it something that you looked at when you were at school and university and thought, that's where I want to be? Like, tell me more about you when you were growing up.
Okay, some fact sharing. So straight out of MBA, I never intended to be in the life science or pharmaceutical space. Very clearly, it was a typical expectation of being in the communication space, in the information technology space, which was obviously the go-to employment options in the early 2000s. But I was terrible in chemistry. I was banished from the chemistry lab in 8th grade, and since then chemistry was not for me, and I never excelled in chemistry. So pharmaceuticals and life sciences was clearly not a direct choice. But as fate has it, I started with banking for a brief period, realized that it is not what I anticipated it to be, got a break into the pharmaceutical industry through a very well organized growing pharmaceutical business from India, and that's how I got on the bandwagon of the pharmaceutical growth story.
And did you see any of your like peers or friends or family that were working in the industry, or was it just by pure chance that you took the opportunity?
I knew some people who were in the industry, but for me, these people were professionals. They were experts in their own area, and I never claimed to be an expert in any area, especially with almost negligible real time work experience. So it was uh, getting to know about an industry from publications, from newspapers, and then getting to work with the team who actually delivers or makes those news that you read about. That is quite satisfying when you get into a professional environment, and that is what clicked with me.
Yeah. So would you say that you were more of a numbers man before you got into the industry? Obviously, starting in banking, was that part of your kind of makeup?
I have always enjoyed working with numbers, data analytics numbers. Till date, I'm very much uh, numbers driven when it comes to taking any decision. So yeah, I enjoyed working with numbers, analytics. At that point of time, we had very, I would say, orthodox tools to be able to analyze any information. But that kind of got me started. And banking was not so much about numbers. This is early 2000s. It was more about getting the relationships and getting to work with people who might have a completely different background. It was challenging at first, but that's also something I realized, that you don't need to be an expert in every space. What you need to know is how experts perform in their own space, and how to work with the experts to be able to learn enough to be able to work along with like a greater organization. And that happens across industry, that happens across organizations, and that's something that allowed me to settle in into the pharmaceutical world, which originally seemed like something that was only meant for experts or someone with degree in chemistry.
Yeah. So you were able to look at it from more of a commercial starting point, coming into different commercial roles in your early career. When did you first feel like a leader, I suppose? Was there a moment when you thought, oh, okay, right, I'm now in a leadership position in this life sciences. I feel like I'm getting into my groove.
I was fortunate to have that moment fairly early in my career. So 2 years in the industry, 2 years in the company, I got to lead a project which allowed automation of the entire reporting structure of the sales force. And in terms of scale, I'm talking about a sales force of roughly 2,500 people. All bringing in various sets of information and data sets. And I got to lead a team that built this automative platform that allowed the whole organization sales to put together their inputs, to put together their activities in a single platform. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I was no way an expert in data analytics. I worked with others who were great at building platform development of softwares, or people who were able to bring in different financial models that can put together all the information and bring out actionable results. So my key contribution was managing the whole process, and to be able to identify opportunities or areas that can come out of the immense amount of data that you are able to extract out of your sales and commercial operations.
Was it a success?
I mean, I believe it was a major success, because uh, we were able to replicate that across different parts of the organization. So this was more of one part of the organization, but based on the success, the same platform was introduced in other parts of the organization, where there were sales data events. And a few years down the line, this particular project was kind of used as a case study for an industry event, where all professionals from the industry within the same segment came together, and it was a case study for an implementation of a large scale project, which included training of people who would not really have a lot of literacy with managing information. So it was very fulfilling, very satisfying to be able to get that recognition and to be able to lead a team that delivered on its objectives.
Nice. So a couple of years in, you're then in a position where you're leading a project that's been successful. At that time, did you have other leaders that were helping guide or mentor you? Or was this all like, I feel this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to head in this direction? Give me some more insight into how you got that pathway.
It was a very interesting journey. So, this was one of a kind project which I had obviously not handled, but the organization also had never introduced or implemented a project like that. So, obviously, I had direction from the division heads because they were obviously much more experienced professionals, and they had a better understanding of the requirements of what each data actionable points that you get, what is the impact, or how do a decision maker at a grassroots level utilize that information to be able to improve the business. So I did have mentors, or uh, experts who were able to direct me in the areas where they were seeking the right inputs coming from the platform that we were able to create.
Yeah. But then you were also creating it or building it as it was flying. So you were getting good input from some leaders, but then also going back to the team and kind of setting your own vision.
Absolutely. One of the things that I realized was, an environment which endorses transparency and open dialogue. I was able to question some of the elements which were being done. And, it was such a great experience to be able to question, to be able to improvise on some of the or existing processes, and, getting a direction where, you're not just following a dictum, you're actually trying to think, question, and critically evaluate, and then come up with a solution. I think that was one of the key learning for me very early in my professional career.
Yeah, yeah. I think being given that opportunity to question, to be curious, to not criticize, but working on things for the betterment of the entire business is such a key moment for you at quite a young age, and obviously still only a couple of years into your career.
Absolutely. So I feel I feel lucky being in an environment which encouraged questioning and critical thinking, something that I endorse even today. My team, they operate in their own space. But one of the things that I always look forward to is open dialogue. We are all working together, and you never know where the best idea or where the best process might come from. I have multiple examples where I can validate, exemplify that you need to have an open mind. Otherwise, you might be restricting a lot of growth areas and efficiencies that might come in if you're a little bit more open minded and are able to hear from people who operate at the grassroots level.
Yeah, and understand other people's point of view with a bit of empathy in there as well.
Absolutely. And I can give an example. So, there is a recent hire. I had someone from outside of the pharmaceutical industry for a role which required, uh, direct coordination and communication with our customers. And, I hired this person because of her background, her skills, and her ability to be resourceful in identifying and working out solutions rather than just getting stuck with way things are already defined. Fast forward a year, uh, you know this person is one of the best hires for my team. Despite not being from the industry, she has picked up very very well, and she is able to coordinate her role. She is able to even step up and handle additional challenges that come up with the roles, to the point where that there could be further opportunities within the organization where very early for this person, there might be additional responsibilities they might they might work upon.
A bit like you had back when you were in the industry for the first time.
uh, just learning from the experts, learning from the industry leaders that I was lucky enough to work with. And again, being open minded, sometimes, being responsible for building a team, you might end up not making the most optimized decision, but you know, you need to have an open mind to be able to work with people who have the right mindset, the right attitude, and eventually you'll get the output or better output than you would have imagined in the first place.
Yeah. And that kind of open-mindedness, obviously that came with that company that you worked for the first, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 years or whatever it was of your career. But it seems as though that they were open-minded and gave you opportunities and gave you a bit of a catalyst for change. So you were able to work in some different countries, different locations, different teams in some different roles. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, part of me has always been restless. When I have been given a challenge, working through it, working through an organization to make sure you get to the end results, and then be prepared for the next challenge. That allowed me to move into a more international, multinational, multicultural work environment, driving business development and M&A. Again, working with industry leaders who operate or who have functional responsibility, but going out and working with people with different backgrounds, and working through their expectations, their contribution, allowed me to really move up and look at a different set of challenges, which allowed me to a contribute on the commercial side, or the business development side to start with, and we really create a direction where me as a professional would wanted to progress, and at the same time really build value that comes back to the company in terms of cash flow, as well as a direction, strategic direction that gets them moving for long term growth areas.
Yeah. And you were able to then take on some new roles, take on some new challenges, and then be able to get into that kind of, as you said, strategy, more business development focused roles, into M&A, in licensing, out licensing. So the kind of whole career development had moved at pretty fast speed.
Yeah, sometimes I learned somewhere, the best way to make God laugh is tell him about your plans. So you plan something, but then life has totally different plans for you. And I had that happen multiple times over a part of my career. So getting into international business development, executing multiple deals, and I thought this would be what I would want to do. uh, Surprisingly, I was given charge of a totally different geographical market, the US market, where I had again no understanding. There was only a beginning of the business, or entry to the US for the organization. And because of some leadership changes, I was brought into the division to be able to support the business's requirements. And I learned over a period of time on how other companies, leaders in the industry are operating, and was able to bring in some of the action areas or action points that would allow my organization to learn from it, and to build a growth model. I was able to successfully acquire a basket of products that came out of a major acquisition, or a merger, uh, in the industry, and I was able to acquire several products, which was again very challenging because this was in late 2008 2009. And it was very much driven through an FTC, Federal Trade Commission driven process. In addition to the challenges of deal making, you had another angle of a government agency which need to be convinced that you are the right uh, partner for that deal. So again, not something that I had planned for, but got the opportunity, got behind it, worked with experts, uh, used consultants wherever required, and we were able to successfully close the deal, providing a lot of learning to the organization and myself, a lot of confidence.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the kind of deal shaping that has now evolved in your career, because you know there is always that element where it's strategy and execution, but then when there's that breakthrough, moment, that's when your career, your confidence, your abilities really start to grow. So, you and I have spoken about it before, but what makes an M&A deal a genuine breakthrough for you? And can you give any examples of what you've done?
Certainly. I mean, when you look at the industry, you look at some major deals, some major acquisitions or mergers, and you think, these happen, and there is a rationale for it. But I would underline the fact that there is a lot of groundwork done before you even get to that stage. It's a typical part of M&As or deal making, where even before you get to an actual opportunity, there is a lot of groundwork that needs to be done to provide you with the right direction. And a lot of companies are in this area where, they're just looking for anything, just anything that can be demonstrated as their initiative or interest in growth areas or external growth areas. And I think that's an error which a lot of organizations do. What we did was really build a groundwork for looking at each growth areas that were available, and the cost benefits investment horizon for each areas, and then very clearly identify the zone where we wanted to operate when it came to acquisitions. And that's how we focused on specific targets. And I was fortunate to direct an acquisition of a derma business, which was transformative for the organization, because globally the organization was not into that space at all. And it was challenging because there were a lot of open questions regarding the operational part of it, the R&D part of it, the science part of it. But we took our time. We got different experts within the organization involved to address each area, and we were able to create an environment and a very well laid out detailed financial plan to be able to justify that investment. And we were able to execute it, get it to the finish line. And even after you close a deal, it's not the end. It's kind of a beginning of another major set of challenge. And in an agile adaptive organization, you pretty much have the business development team continue and manage integration as well. So you might have a great idea, but if you don't really follow up on those ideas during integration, you kind of lose value. So we were able to do that, again bringing additional set of challenges. But the focus was there and the groundwork was there, which allowed us to be able to handle and make sure that even the unknowns that came through were successfully handled. And it was a great learning experience. It was a great acquisition for the business, allowed us entry into multiple geographies in that segment. And we were able to add cash flow as well as a long-term direction to the business.
And when you look at like, because you've got a lot of conviction in how you bring in the experts, right? But how do you get them to back those bold moves? What's the influencing skills that you need both pre-deal and then post-deal?
um See, you need to treat experts with due respect, and be professional, be transparent with them. If you give them a challenge without really clearly laid out and deliverables, they might not even be motivated, or they might give you something that you're not looking for. So what has worked for me is working with experts, giving them very clearly laid out deliverables. What do we want them to tell us? What are the questions we want answered? And that's a part of the due diligence, where you really cover different angles, different functional areas. And wherever you don't have in-house expertise, you reach out to industry professionals who can guide you in the right direction, but they need to know what their contribution is. And that works for me even today, both with internal stakeholders as well as external experts. You engage with them, you pay them, but you need to have very clearly laid out deliverables, and you need to be transparent on where you are. You sometimes you work with experts, multiple experts in the same space, but then you need to ensure that you're covering all angles if there is a higher quotient of risk.
Yeah. And I mean, you spoke about it in your active ingredients at the beginning. It's objective settings, it's that clear and long-term strategic plan as well. If you can have that open-minded yet honest conversation with people and say, right, this is what I need from you. It's all totally clear. It makes life a lot easier.
It does. I'll give you another example. So one of the best experiences I had in an organization that I worked for 3 years. Day one, when I joined them, my boss called me and we sat down to brainstorm what are the objectives. And he was very clear what he wanted me to focus on for the next 2 years. He was prepared with a clearly laid out plan on what are the growth areas, what zone he wanted to focus on and where he wanted my contribution. And that was wonderful because you're joining an organization, you're trying to pick up pieces from different people. And when your objective, when your deliverable is well defined on day one, it kind of sets a tone of how well organized or how optimized the organization operates, where you're not running in multiple directions. You're focusing on very clear areas, and that allows you to really zero in on specific targets.
Yeah, love
That's
it.
something that I try to follow as much as possible. Having said that, it needs to be adaptable. So it's not that something that is identified is a dogma. It doesn't work like that. It needs to be adaptable, but it needs to start somewhere in a clear direction. Otherwise, you'll not be able to get the best possible target or best possible result because of the noise that you create around it.
Yeah, great. So let's talk a little bit more about the evolution of partnerships then in your career and how, from front end to back end deals, how it's changed. What has changed for you? Because you and I have spoken before about why traditional deal structures no longer seem fit for purpose. So can you give us a little bit more insight into that?
Absolutely. I mean, in my experience, business development has significantly shifted towards more of a strategic focus, technology, and greater engagement from the partners. It is very important for companies to have a very clear, focused approach on well defined high growth, high return target areas. Business development is now heavily influenced by AI and digital technologies. It helps evaluate assets, evaluate targets, and generate financial forecasting models, which are bread and butter of any business development deal. BD has also evolved into a more result oriented approach that requires deeper engagement from the partners. But at the same time, the payouts, the milestones are now tied to product performance and long term goals rather than like fixed values. What you mentioned earlier, instead of more front ended, it is more towards back ended, which is based on the actual contribution a product, technology, an asset can bring to the table in the end, and gives enough room for both organizations to grow and risk mitigate. I think that's a clear evolution I've seen over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So what do you think is the secret to building long-term high impact or high return partnerships in today's market?
The groundwork. You need to spend enough time and have the right data set to be able to identify these growth areas. And it's not an exercise one would take lightly. You might have to work with tremendous amount of data. AI is a very useful tool given the right mindset. And if you are able to utilize AI to be able to pass through a significant amount of information, that helps you fast track. Uh, One needs to be careful. A lot of times I've seen industry professionals look at AI as something that can just shorten the amount of thinking they need to do. AI is not a substitute to strategy, to vision, to thinking through a challenge. It is a tool which allows you to pass through information and just fast track a work stream which would have taken longer if it is not automated. AI should be used as a tool to better organize different parts of an activity, different parts of due diligence, or different parts of, say, evaluating business areas. It is in no way a substitute for someone sitting down and thinking strategically and where to operate and how to go about it. So I think That's an important learning. That's an important change that has happened. And this groundwork allows you to really provide that confidence to potential partners that you have done your homework. You are clear on what the combined entity or combined operations are going to look like, which gives them confidence, which gives them that trust factor that you've done your work, and what you're looking for is something that ties up with the end results that they had potentially worked upon as well.
Nice. And can companies still win without shared risk? Or is that the new cost of entry?
For me, the days where companies completely direct the deal structure are no longer successful. Even at complex product partnerships, there are always elements which leave enough value for both partners. In a deal, sometimes you're working with a large organization, and the other partner may not be as big, maybe even a startup in many cases. But in the uh, prevailing times, there needs to be enough value, enough skin in the game for the partner to be confident enough to sustain their interest, and deliver on their commitments for any deal.
Yeah, and what about when the deals are getting even more complex, though? Should we talk about the trade barriers? What's going on in the global industry?
I mean, industry has been evolving, obviously, and given the current geopolitical environment, obviously there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of uncertainty regarding the cross-border trade, especially driven from the U.S. policy making. I mean, this volatility in U.S. policy has created systemic uncertainty across the whole pharmaceutical value chain. It has affected cost, it has affected supply chain stability, it has created uncertainty with merger and acquisition activities, and obviously, unpredictability with regulatory environment. And this has obviously resulted in investors putting greater uncertainty and risk allocation on their investment plans. So certainly it's a challenging environment.
Yeah, and what do you think leaders in the life sciences should be doing to engage with the different, I don't know, policymakers or regulators? How do you think that we could be looking at that differently?
I mean, there is a prolonged approach. You obviously need to engage with the policymakers to influence and correct them if they're working on policy making which is not really following a direction which would create or which would support long-term innovation. In terms of controllable factors within an organization, one needs to diversify sourcing and manufacturing globally. This allows mitigation of single point risk. You need to keep a razor sharp eye on the P&L, and areas in which the cost fluctuations can be mitigated and absorbed. Again, I endorse utilization of AI and data analytics for monitoring of supply chain and proactive forecasting based on different elements that keep changing in the regulatory environment.
Yeah, because I think that kind of perfectionism um, has totally reshaped supply chain. There is absolutely no way of us really knowing what to predict next. And I think that, as you say, if you've got that multi-pronged approach with diversity in the value chain, you're definitely going to be mitigating some of that risk. What about um, the biggest risks that companies face as the borders close and trade barriers are rising? What do you think we should be looking at, and looking around corners to watch out for next?
I've seen examples where the industry has responded with a renewed focus on risk mitigation, uh, agility, and innovation. To elaborate further, industry is implementing strategies to withstand such external shocks. They're reducing reliance on external suppliers and boosting domestic production of critical drug elements, utilizing strategic partnership, licenses, and alliances to expand market access, diversify operation, and really push the pedal on innovation. Something that can be driven as much as possible domestically. And a lot of companies have significantly invested in social media and automation to be able to reach out to greater set of customers, partners, at the same time optimizing their supply chain and improving their compliance monitoring and increasing the operational agility.
Yeah. Okay. I- I'm keen to speak a little bit more about your kind of your leadership style. Obviously, we've covered a lot of topics there from an understanding of your expertise. But when we talk about leading with, as you said, leading with vision, you've built a lot of good teams. Obviously, you've built a lot of trust internally and externally. How do you do that? What does great leadership look like in today's multi-dimensional, super complex BD environment?
It's an evolving space. So, I can tell you about what has worked for me. For me, what has really clicked well in building trust and confidence with my teams, both internal and external, is really a transparency, adaptability, systemic thinking, and clear objective setting. I mean, as a leader, you need to have the cognitive flexibility and adaptability to navigate, the shifts and changes happening in the industry regulations. Utilizing digital tools, utilizing AI to be able to better organize and better process some of the information points that you get, allows you to gain confidence and to be able to take better decisions based on the current factors of current environment that operates in each space. So that has helped me. I mean, going to a meeting, being prepared with the right data points, and with clearly laid out actionable points has been tremendously useful, where partners respect because they see value for their time. And again, it's old school, doing the right groundwork before you enter a discussion or a partnership or a deal is tremendously helpful when it comes to gaining the right output from a particular engagement.
Yeah. And when it comes to like team development, we'll talk about your hiring strategy in a moment, but like what's the what's the most kind of you're breaking things down really simplistically. I really like it. When you're hiring for your teams or for your businesses, how do you try and identify high performance in people? Or, how do you try and identify whether they're going to be the right fit, even if they are a wild card, like you said earlier, that comes with no industry experience?
There are various elements that go into this process. One is, the starting point is using AI and data analytics to really identify. Sometimes you publish, you're looking for a role, and you have too many applications, too much of interest, which is really not possible, to be able to pass through. So using AI tools to make sure that at least at a high level you are able to identify uh, potential employees who fit the bill, who have the right qualifications. No substitute to in-person engagement, speaking to professionals. And I make it a point to speak with every single hire that I add to my team. It's not something I automate. It's not something I delegate to someone else. Getting to spend time with each potential hire is very important. Understanding their motivations. Lot of uh, lot of people in the industry come with subject matter knowledge. I don't think that's the biggest challenge. For me, the biggest challenge is the value that they bring to the table, the motivation that they have every single day to be able to do what they do. I think getting to the roots of some of these elements is highly important, and that is exactly something that has worked for me in most of the hires I've done over the past 15 years.
Yeah, I love it. Before we start to talk about the future of the life sciences industry, what I'm quite keen to understand, because you seem as though you're very clear on your ability to use data, to use AI, what I'm interested in is your thoughts on the future of leadership. What's exciting you or what's worrying you about the future of leadership with the new generation of people coming through? Be keen to understand your kind of viewpoint on this.
I think future of leadership, we are looking at a future of life sciences which is defined by an amalgamation of technology, data, and biology. AI and machine learning is accelerating the whole process of drug development. This has stimulated development of customized medications targeted at very clearly defined patient groups. Good leaders or good leaders in the organization have used data for bringing efficiencies in R&D and regulatory oversight. A lot of leaders have focused on building a clear AI and data strategy. In fact, I've spoken to multiple investors who demand a clear AI and data strategy in the business plan for any investment opportunity they look at. So I think it's all coming together where the contribution or the amalgamation of AI along with data technology and human vision is coming together, and organizations or professionals who are successfully manage this amalgamation stand a better chance in this ever evolving life science environment.
Yeah, lovely. And what about the actual life sciences itself? What excites you most about where the industry is heading, taking away the kind of tech, data, biology, leadership piece? Like, what about the actual industry itself?
And the industry is obviously driven by innovation. I think the extent of innovation happening in the industry and the challenges that have been solved by this focus on different tools that are available today. I mean, this is an industry that got a vaccine for COVID in record time, saving millions of lives. This is an industry which is highly regulated, highly challenging, highly capital intensive as well, but it has been able to bring about improved quality of life for greater set of population globally. This is an industry which is brought innovations, where we have much better medical solutions to unmet medical needs. Could be cardiovascular diseases, could be weight management, could be anti-diabetes, could be cancer. So what drives me and what makes me positive about the industry is this whole focus on innovation, and the industry is working diligently on multiple platforms, multiple areas where the major problems of the past could be addressed by a technology solution. Could really identify population groups which so far did not really have any option. So I think that's something that is really driving the future of the industry. I think the key question that still remains is affordability, and especially in the US, given the complex environment it operates in. But that has not stopped the companies from going after innovation.
Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword. Innovation is at its most exciting element with new technologies, with AI, with everything that's coming through. But then you have the, as you said, affordability and the investment landscape. We've got to try and get those two things, combined in the right way for access to the right technologies and the right future of life sciences. I've really enjoyed today's answers. Thank you very much for answering those on the future of both leadership and life sciences. Really enjoyed that. So we're coming to the end now. I just wanted to say a massive thank you. I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I certainly have. We've covered off some amazing topics here, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Great conversation. Again, a lot of learning for me, a lot of brainstorming to be able to really share some of the learnings I've had over the past 22 years. So I appreciate you providing this platform, allowing me to share some of my thoughts and my learnings.
Wonderful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.